That looks like crap. Hopefully I can fix it.
CGQ Plus.
Alright, so first things first. Normally I record these videos in the daytime, like 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because as I've said many times, I have this big window in the room that provides a lot of natural, like fill light for making videos. But it's raining outside and it's almost 5 o'clock, so the sun's going down. And so basically, I don't have that light. So I've got the overhead light turned on in the room here, and I have my 2 video lights going. But I mean, I can already see just looking in the screen on the camera that the lighting doesn't look so hot, and I'll see what I can do about it while I'm editing. But you know, if this video isn't up to the usual production standards of CGQ Plus, if it has production standards, then I apologize. And the second thing, real quick, just sort of a little format change that I think I'm going to do going forward. So I made that pickups video, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know, a few weeks ago, whenever it was. And I wasn't sure how that was going to go, if people were going to like that, me doing that style of video. But it seems like it got about the same amount of views that a flashback episode gets. So it seems like you like that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to keep doing that. I mean, maybe like once a month or something, I'll make a video like that. That would just be, you know, I try to avoid like the standard YouTube tropes. Like, I don't want to call it a vlog, or I don't even really want to call it a pickups video. I don't really know what else to call it. But it's not a flashback episode, and it's not an episode of CGQ Live. So it's just like, you know, the whole point of a video like that is like, you know, I'm showing you like, hey, here's some stuff I picked up in the last month. But really, it's an excuse. Like, I just need, you know, something to get a conversation going so that I can just talk. And, you know, so a video like that would also allow me to talk about maybe like what games I'm playing now and stuff like that. So, but the point is that I think that the mail segment would fit in a lot better with those videos than with the flashback videos. You know, because the problem is I have a lot of things that I'm trying to like kind of keep in my head when I hit the record button. Like, okay, I want to talk about like, you know, A, B, C, D, E. And like, I don't want to write it all down on a piece of paper and like tape it to the tripod, because that seems kind of disingenuous, because then I'm not really talking off the cuff anymore. But, you know, sometimes I'm spending, you know, 10, 15 minutes going through the mail, and then by that time I'm like forgetting stuff. And to a certain extent, that happened on the last episode of Flashback, because there were some things that I didn't talk about, and there was something I talked about that I shouldn't have. So anyway, point is, no more mail segment in the Flashback episodes, but only because it's going to get moved to those other videos. So I still promise that I will show on the show everything that gets sent into the show. So anyway, that being said, we are going to dive right in to this episode of Flashback. Now, last time on Flashback, I mentioned that I got my first computer. It was an Epson Equity II, which was an XT class system with an 8086 processor, 2 double density 5¼ inch floppy disk drives, no mouse, and a green monochrome monitor. And I mentioned at the end of the last episode that this time on the show, we were going to talk about the first major upgrades that I got. But before we get to that, one of the sort of mistakes that I made in the last episode was talking about Scorch, or Scorched Earth, because I mentioned that I thought that I remembered playing that game on the computer before I got a color monitor. And just subsequent to recording that episode, I did a little bit of reading about Scorch online, just for, you know, reminiscing purposes. And that game was only compatible with VGA cards, so there's no way I played that game. But that's fine. It was, you know, we still got to talk about it, and maybe I'll play it on a live stream someday or something. But I have some other things to show that just, you know, maybe have interesting stories behind them or whatever. But then another thing that I kept saying I was going to talk about and then just kept not doing it, I edited it out all the times that I said that, so you probably didn't see it. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about Stuart and kind of the whole setup he had at his house. Because as I mentioned, this was a time when Jonathan just sort of slowly started fading out of my life, and Stuart became like my new best friend because we were like computer buddies. And as I mentioned, Stuart's dad was a video game programmer for Sierra Online, which is, at that time it was called Sierra Online. They changed it to just Sierra later. Originally it was just Online Systems. Then it was Sierra Online when they moved up to Oakhurst or Coarsegold. And then they dropped the online part because it really kind of didn't make sense anyway. But anyway, so Stuart's dad, like, this was sort of the job that he had, you know, that was his job, like, to make money or whatever. But he was also a full-time student at the local 4-year university. He was majoring in, as you might expect, computer science. And so because of that, he had to have like a nice computer set up at home. And so that was, look, their main source of income was Stuart's dad with the video game programming, and Stuart's mom, I think, did some side work as like a seamstress. But one of the things that, I was able to better relate to Stuart because we both kind of came from a background or whatever where we didn't really have a lot of extra money. Like, and you might be saying, well, wait a minute, you both have computers. And yeah, that's true. Again, I have this old outdated computer that I still don't understand where my mom came up with the money to buy it. And I'm going to explain why Stuart had his computer. So, Stuart's dad had to have like a modern computer because he worked from home. He wasn't like driving up to Oakhurst and doing his game programming there. He would just do it at his house. And so he had a nice computer set up. And in fact, so he had like a home office, and the door, because it was just a bedroom, but the door actually had a deadbolt on it because, this was like the very early 90s. And he had thousands of dollars worth of computer stuff in there. And he lived in a reasonably nice neighborhood, but he basically lived in the neighborhood that I lived in before he moved up to my grandma's house. And we got our house broken into multiple times because even though we were in an okay neighborhood, we were kind of like bad neighborhood adjacent. And so people would come over and break into your house. And, but someone breaks into your house, the clock's ticking, they don't have forever. And if there's a door with a deadbolt on it, they're probably just going to move on. So, but anyway, so that was like his room, and we weren't even allowed really in there. Like, I don't think I ever set foot in that room, even when Stuart's dad was home, because I was always kind of, I know I already said like I was kind of scared of Jonathan's dad. I was kind of scared of Stuart's dad too. He was kind of an intense guy. But anyway, so the computer that Stuart had was like a hand-me-down from his dad. Like, he upgraded and got, I don't know, whatever by then, like maybe even a 386 by then. And so he gave Stuart his old XT system. And he actually taught Stuart like how to program. Like, I don't know if those old Sierra games were programmed in C or what they were programmed in, but he would teach Stuart like how to program, to the point that Stuart, after high school, ended up getting a job as a video game programmer, even though like he had taken some college courses but didn't have a degree, which you probably couldn't get away with anymore. But anyway, that's how Stuart had his setup, and that's why his setup was kind of like out in this unused living room, is because the office or whatever was for Stuart's dad. And yeah, so I just kind of wanted to explain that, but because we're going to talk about, Stuart's dad a little bit more in this episode, so I kind of wanted to just lay some groundwork there. So I mentioned last time, I brought a couple items for show and tell. I mentioned last time that the first major upgrade, if you even want to call it that I made to the computer was that I got a mouse. And as I also said, it was just some no-name mouse that you would go get at like a mom and pop computer shop for like 10 or 15 bucks. I don't think I needed an interface card for it because the computer should have had a serial port on the back, I would think. Because back then, a lot of times, as I'm going to show you in a second, you'd get some piece of external hardware and it would have to come with like some kind of interface card because you couldn't just plug it into your system. But I think with the mouse, I think when you bought a mouse back then, you bought a serial mouse and it came with a floppy disk because you had to put like mouse.com or whatever it was called, in your DOS directory and then add a line to, I guess it was autoexec.bat. It doesn't really matter. What I brought here though, so this is just like the mouse that Stuart had. And at least in my opinion, I think this was kinda, and somebody else can tell me if they have another opinion. To me, this was kind of like the Cadillac of you say mice or mouses? I don't know. back around those times, and that was the Logitech 3-button mouse. And that seemed very advanced because this was a time when PC mouses generally were 2-button. And of course, if you had an Apple or a Macintosh, you just had the 1-button. And but that third middle button would be used just like for some programs, like maybe if you use like DPaint or I don't know, maybe some kind of like Autodesk kind of program, you'd use the third button. But the fact that you had it made it seem like really advanced. And of course, this is a traditional mouse that has like the rubber coated steely in it. And so every once in a while it would start getting like, it seemed like it would get jittery or get hung up. And, you know, you'd have to unscrew this thing and pop the ball out, maybe clean the ball off with some alcohol. And then you'd have to you get a Q-tip and you'd clean those rollers in there. And they would have just like all that fuzz built up on them. But anyway, so Stuart had a mouse like this that I'm sure was a hand-me-down from his dad. And then I think I must have found this one in a thrift store. But the other thing, I'm just, you know, kind of trying to talk about like the kind of things I was doing with the computer when it was still just the monochrome display. But and that gets to the other thing, and I don't remember the context, but I've mentioned this on the show before, and that is this DFI, which I can't remember what DFI stands for. The F is flower. I forgot what the D is, like diamond flower. It's some weird name. Handy. It's called a handy scanner. And it's an actual scanner that it's obviously handheld, and so you would put your document or whatever down on the desk, and then you would lay this or on top of it, and it's got a little button by your thumb, and you would slowly roll it over your document and scan it. And it's kind of funny because like the actual you know, the eyeball or whatever you want to call it of the scanner is not even as wide as a piece of paper. So, you know, I don't know what this was used for in its intended setting. I can only tell you what I used it for. So this was something that Stuart's dad had. Oh, and I was going to say I misspoke. So the last time I brought this up, you know, I just mentioned quickly that there was this handheld scanner that was Stuart's dad's, and I said that I still have it. And somebody, I'm sure just joking, made a comment about how like, oh, he stole Stuart's dad's scanner. Well, it wasn't literally this one. It was this exact same model, but I found this at a thrift store. And as cool as it would be to be able to actually demonstrate it for you guys, unfortunately I can't use this because this is an example of something that when you bought this, it came with an ISA card that you stuck in your computer, and then you plug this into the ISA card, and then it has its own software. And I don't have the card, so unfortunately I can't use this. But it's still just a kind of a cool piece of nostalgia to have. And so anyway, like one night, you know, Stuart used to spend the night at my house pretty often, or sometimes I'd spend the night at his house. But it seems like more often he would come spend the night at my house. And you know, we'd stay up late and play video games or walk down to the gas station, you know, like 10 o'clock at night and get some junk food. And you know, he'd bring over like, you know, what, like maybe he got like a new game from his dad, or he'd bring over old games, or he'd just bring over whatever. And one night he brought over the scanner and the interface card. Like his dad actually let him take it, which seems odd because his dad was not the kind of guy that would really do, not because he wasn't nice, but just, you know, he always thought kids were like little fools, and you know, we shouldn't be messing around with stuff. But anyway, Stuart's dad let him bring it over. And so I had around this time this sort of stack of adult reading material that a friend of my mom's had actually given to me. And you know, I kind of had it in the closet or whatever. And it was Playboys. It wasn't like that big of a deal. It was just some Playboys. And I remember that, as you know, he brought this over, and the first, like, okay, well, what should we scan? And you know, we're like, at that time I would have been 13, and Stuart was the same age, you know, and we're obviously therefore, you know, very puerile. And so I of course went and grabbed one of the Playboys and, you know, unfolded the centerfold there, and we used this to scan, you know, Miss December or whatever in, you know, monochrome Hercules graphics. And I just remember the funny part about that is that, of course, when you're scanning something like this, if you're scanning text, it's very important to go in a straight line, because as you scan, whatever this sees is going to be on the screen in a straight line. But, you know, Miss December, I guess, wasn't standing straight up. And and I didn't know how to use this thing, right? And so I just remember that I was like trying to follow the you know, contour of her stance or whatever. But that's the only thing I remember us even scanning with this thing, to be honest. But yeah, just an example of the kind of fun that we had back then. And anyway, I guess that brings us to the game we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to we're going to talk about 3 games, really. But the first game I'm going to talk about, I should give credit where credit is due to a viewer named Shane, because Shane was the one that mentioned this game down in the comments of the last video, and it's really the game that I should have talked about. But in some ways, it's better that we waited and did it here, because this is a game that I started playing in monochrome, and then when I got a color display, I could keep playing it that way. And that game is SimCity. And probably a lot of people don't even know that the original versions of SimCity could be played on like a monochrome display, just because, you know, I think once SimCity Deluxe, it was called, came out in '93, that kind of became the de facto version of SimCity. It was DOS and Windows 3.1 compatible. And if you look pretty much anywhere online now for a downloadable copy, you know, like abandonware websites or whatever, if you look for a downloadable copy of SimCity, it's almost always going to be the 1993 version, which is quite a bit different in a good way. Like, it's got support for sound cards, so it had like all this digitized sound in it and everything, and it was like a much more polished version of the game versus the original, which I have here and I'll show in a second. But I cannot remember. I want to say this guy's name was Marshall, but I might have just made that up. So I could swear I've talked about this guy before too, but I'm not sure. But he was Stuart's next door neighbor. And this guy, we'll just say his name is Marshall because I feel like it is. This guy was, I don't know, it feels to me now looking back that the guy was probably like 30. Because at the time, of course, we thought he was like old because he was a grown-up. But looking at it now, I don't think he was actually that old. Like, he was married and had a young kid, but he had a computer. And so for that, you know, I think as soon as Stuart caught wind of the fact this guy also had a computer, you know, we would turn into like little leeches, right? Well, what do you got? What do you got? You know, maybe something we want a copy of or whatever. And he had a copy of SimCity. And now SimCity came out originally on the PC in '89. Like, it came out for other systems, but I'm saying the first PC release was in '89. And remember, this is in like 1990. Maybe early 1991, so it's not that old of a game. And and I remember that we wanted the discs from him, and he gave them to us, but I remember he was like nervous about it, like, because he knew, well, I'm not supposed to be, you know, sharing this with people or whatever, but he did. And so we went and made copies of the discs so that we could play it. But as anybody that played SimCity back in the DOS days knows, it had copy protection, which I'll show here in just a second. I'll show that later. So you might have already seen sitting over here, I actually have 2 copies of SimCity, which seems kind of hoardy, I think. And normally I don't do that. There's a very small handful of games that I have 2 copies of. But the reason for that is that these are actually slightly different releases. And one of them I actually just picked up very recently. You know, I'll go into a thrift store and I see stuff. It was the same thing, honestly, in the pickups video. I showed that basic games book. I already had the book. I didn't need it, but it's like you see something like that sitting in Goodwill, and like, you know, to the right person, that's kind of like a treasure, and you just kind of feel like you have to rescue it, if that makes sense. And so when I saw a complete in the box copy of SimCity, and I think it was something like $2, I just felt like, you know, how can I not rescue that? So, so this is the original version, which you can just tell because this one only says 89 on the back. And of course, on the back of the box, it has screenshots from different versions. IBM EGA screen, Amiga screen, color Macintosh 2 screen, which actually looks really impressive, although so does the IBM EGA. And then, of course, the black and white Macintosh screen. But it's still pretty high resolution. I want to say, weren't Macintosh screens like 800 by 600? I'm not sure, but yeah. So this one only supports up to EGA graphics, so it does not support VGA. So I was wrong, but all the more reason, because I think if you got the 1993 deluxe version, it did support VGA graphics. And these two versions are a little bit different in that this one has this slip cover. So if we take that off, you just have a black box with the Maxis logo on it. And the only reason that I'm opening this to show you, I think I've mentioned this before, but this is an integral part of the whole Marshall story. But I mean, just to see what else is in here. I mean, it's nothing big. It's got the, you got the manual, you know, duh. And registration card. Well, this is telling you to send in the registration card. And I don't know. It's just like a basic quick start guide. Now available, the SimCity terrain editor. You could send away for it. And I actually had the terrain editor, and that I actually bought, but I found it in a computer store. I didn't send away for it. But, you know, I always had a copied, like, pirated version of SimCity, but I had the terrain editor. And then, well, okay, I guess they did support at least one sound card. It says here, SimCity supports the Covox Soundmaster, and then shows a picture of the card, which I guess if you bought a Covox Soundmaster, it came with speakers, which, I mean, that'd be kind of cool. Last minute info and new features. City dynamics charts. This was, well, this is multiple things. This is pretty cool. SimCity keyboard reference chart, because of course you could play SimCity without a keyboard. I didn't. Zone evolution chart and city dynamics chart. So it's just got some helpful stuff. And then you got both 3.5. Here's a 3.5 inch disc. That'd be I guess a 720K disc, or you got two 360K double density 5.25 inch discs. And then the registration card is in here, which means that the original owner didn't follow the instructions. But all of that was really to get to this last thing, which is the copy protection scheme. And the way that I don't think this is even going to show up on camera, but we'll see. I mentioned this before, that it looks like blue ink, like it's not black ink, and it's on this dark maroon paper. And the point of that was to make it hard to photocopy. Oh, it'll show up. It's fine. So that you can see there's those two symbols. Well, I'll move it like that. There's two symbols, and then the name of a city and the population of a city. So the way it would work is the game would show you the two symbols, and then it would either ask you for the name or it would ask you for the population, and you had to write that in. And of course, Marshall didn't really want to give this to us, but we were able to borrow it from him. And if I remember correctly, we actually hand copied this entire thing so that we could then play the game. Now, all that happens is if you don't have this and you put in the wrong answer, 3 times in a row or whatever, you can still play the game, but you're going to be like besieged by disasters. So that makes it a lot less fun. But anyway, so well, I don't know if we want to look in the other box. The only thing that was cool that I saw in the other box is well, there was a couple cool things in the other box. So actually, let's just check it out real quick. I'll pack the rest of this up later. So this again, this is the 1991 re-release. Still only goes up to EGA graphics. So again, this is not the deluxe version. But the two things that were cool in here were the Maxis software catalog, which is fun to look through. And then this actually has two sets of discs. It's got the set that came with it originally, and then it's got, although I think these are actually in here backwards, because the set of discs, so this is a manila envelope that came from Maxis and was addressed to, I guess, the original owner of this game, who actually lived here in the Sacramento area, which makes me wonder how this ended up where I bought it, because it wasn't in the Sacramento area. So there's a set of discs in here, but I think this is the old version, because these discs look just like those discs. So I'm guessing that probably what happened is the owner when they got the new discs, put the old ones in here, and then put the new ones in the box. But so it's still just, one 3.5 or two 5 1/4. They look a little bit different. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think this is version 1.07, and I think this is version 1.01. So it's probably just like bug fixes and whatnot. But so I thought that was kind of neat, getting something like that. And I think I have a couple of games where I have something like that, where I have extra discs that got sent to the original owner by the manufacturer, or the publisher, rather. But then I also just thought it was kind of cool having this Maxis catalog, because then you can see what other kind of games were available in 1991 from Maxis. Like I remember, here's the first game on there is A-Train, which I've never really gotten to play that much, and I would like to, because I think I'd really like this game. It seems like, in a way, it kind of builds off the whole SimCity thing. It sort of has the perspective of SimCity 2000, but the point seems more to set up train systems. And it says down here, available for IBM/DOS, $69.99. So that's a lot. And then on the next page here, you've got SimAnt and SimEarth, which were both pretty popular games. Probably SimEarth more so than SimAnt, but I actually have a copy of SimAnt around here somewhere as well. $59.99 for SimAnt and $69.99 for SimEarth. They have SimCity in here. That one's only $49.99 for DOS. They were selling a Windows version at that time, but I don't have that. You could also get the Commodore 64 version. Now, if you watched my Super Nintendo in 1991 video, I gave a really brief history of SimCity. And I mentioned that the game was originally developed for the Commodore 64, but Will Wright couldn't find someone to publish it. And that's why he and a buddy of his founded Maxis, and they ended up publishing the game on the PC, but then went back and published it on the Commodore 64. And then the color Macintosh version is in here. Now, to be fair, it says in here that includes the terrain editor, but it's $79.99. Now, I guess Apple computer owners were just maybe accustomed to the idea that they were going to have to spend more money than anybody else. And then in here they also have, I don't know if anybody else remembers these, I remember these, the SimCity graphics sets. And I don't know if you'll be able to see, it's in that little yellow box. But those were like these tile replacement sets, I guess maybe you could call it. And they would change the graphics. Like it says here, set 1, ancient cities include ancient Asia, medieval times, and Wild West. Set 2, future cities include future USA, future Europe, and Moon Colony. And at some point I got these, but I don't think I had them originally. And then here's SimCity for Windows, which is just, it's SimCity, but it'll run in like Windows 3.1, which, I don't know. I don't know why you'd want that. I feel like some people who are more casual PC users back then would have their computer set up so that the last line of autoexec.bat told it to run win.exe and just load straight into Windows. But, kids like us that primarily had computers for playing games did not do that, because we spent most of our time out in DOS. And that's probably about it. And then, then the last thing here they have is books. And I do have one of these books, which we'll talk about here in just a second. So I am going to show some footage of the games we're talking about today, but I don't want it turning into like some kind of drawn out Let's Play. So what I'm going to start doing, maybe not just today, but I mean in subsequent flashbacks, is I'm going to go ahead and use my capture setup downstairs with the nice overlays that were made for me. And I'll just record myself playing the game and talking, and then kind of chop it up to make it shorter and hopefully more interesting. So first, let's check out some SimCity in monochrome Hercules graphics. All right, so we're down here at our virtual. I guess this would be like a Tandy 1000, which of course is not what I actually had. But this is a very nice overlay that someone named Yura made for me for doing live streams and for doing stuff like this.
So you can see that we've got the monitor here configured in green monochrome mode. I'm of course just using DOSBox, and I've got everything loaded up so that all we need to do is type SimCity, and it's going to load up. And then I've already got a city going, so we just have to load it. The city name is Hot Damn, which there's a story behind that, but I'll tell that in a few episodes later. So for now, it's just the city's called Hot Damn. All right, so like I said, I already kind of got this city going a little bit. I've got my coal power plant way up here in the corner, and then the industrial zones next to it. And I think that's a trick that I picked up out of that book, to keep all of your pollution creating properties on the edge of the screen, because that way some of the pollution ends up going off screen. Now the downside to that is that I have the rest of my city kind of way over here. We'll put it on, especially early in the going. I think you can go ahead and just put your city on like fast or even fastest, because you don't really have that much to keep track of. SimCity is kind of an interesting game in that there's a lot of just waiting around that you do, which I can't really think of a modern game that really works that way. Like I've put down some zones here, and some of it's getting developed, but there's really nothing more for me to do except just kind of sit here and watch it. Here's the first of these fiscal budget windows that pop up, and the most important thing is really right here, your cash flow. You see, I'm at positive $143 for the year, which is not very good, but you basically just want to like keep it above zero. So, and the tax rate, I've got the tax rate set at 8%, whereas the default is 7%. So I already inched the taxes up a little bit. But the more people that you can basically pack into your city, without having to increase too much your expenses on like infrastructure and whatnot, has a lot to do with how much positive cash flow you have. But I mean, you can also hear that there's really not, this game's quiet. The only sound effects there are is if I build something. Now later in the game, when you build things like a port, like a seaport, that will give it a few more sound effects, but overall, I mean, the game almost sounds kind of deserted. Now, if we had the that Kovac Soundmaster or whatever, then I'm sure it would sound way better. Nobody's moving into this industrial zone over here, which is very strange. But so I'll put in another one or two over here. And I did put in one down here. I don't know why I did that, except maybe just to see if that would be better since it's closer to the city center. But that's going to cause pollution problems down the road, which we can look at it over here. So this is the map, which is very hard to read in Hercules mode. But when you play the game in color, it looks quite a bit better. But if we click on this, you see the pollution map, and the darker is worse. So you see we've got some light pollution over our city center, and then some darker pollution over here on the edge. And then we'll put in one more commercial. Commercial is always kind of the finickiest, I think, of the three zone types, because I need to run some power cables across the road there. I feel like it's hardest to get commercial zones developed for some reason. And you can see here we got my city or my town is growing into a full-size city with a current population of 10,000. So that's pretty good. But yeah, anyway, so that's SimCity in monochrome Hercules graphics.
But that's how I first started playing SimCity, and I loved it, and I thought it was great. Now, to sort of transition into the next part of this episode, there was this camera store where Stuart and I lived. It was called Boots Camera, and but for some reason they also started selling computers in the 80s. I guess they figured a lot of people that were going to be into like photography would be like creative type people that might also want computers. I don't really know, but Stuart and I used to ride bikes around a lot, and we would go to stores, like we'd go to computer stores and just look around because we didn't really have money to buy anything, but you would just go check stuff out and kind of loiter. And one of the places we would go is Boots Camera. And the first thing I was going to say about that is that's where I got this book, which was featured in the catalog back there. And I don't really have anything to say about this book. It's just, but I've had this book, since I was like 14 years old. And that is SimCity Strategies and Secrets by this guy, Nick Dargahi. I'm probably not saying his name correctly. But yeah, it was $12.95. But, I was never really all that great at playing SimCity for as much as I liked it. I used to always use the cheat code, so which was just to type out FUND for fund on the keyboard. Now, the thing is, when you would type in that cheat code, it would trigger a disaster. Like you could type it in 2-3 times and then a disaster would strike. And then if you did it again 2-3 times, a disaster would strike. And so the secret to the game was to do it right when you started a new city. Because then if a disaster strikes, like who cares? You don't have anything built yet. And I think the maximum amount of money you could have originally in SimCity was like $99,999. I might be wrong about that, but there was a cap. And so you would type in FUND, FUND, FUND as many times as you could to get as much money as you possibly could. And that way you could kind of just build your city without really having to worry about, like, can I afford this yet? And which is really part of the secret to SimCity is it has to be self-sustaining. Like you can take short-term losses, spending too much money on like maintenance of parks and, police stations and fire stations and roads and whatnot. But over the long term, that's not sustainable. So, so I think when you start off SimCity, you start off with something like $15,000, and you can blow through it pretty quickly if you're not careful. But as I said, I picked this up at that Boots Camera store because I probably had some money burning a hole in my pocket. And it says $12.95, but it seems unlikely I would have had that much money on me. So I wonder if they had it priced down, maybe like $10 or something. I don't really know, but yeah. So I still have that book after all this time. But the other thing that we saw at that store, where, it was the first time I'd ever seen this, was we saw a Super VGA monitor. And they had it set up like, it was like a demo computer that was just showing a slideshow of just different images. And the one that I remember sticking out in my mind was it was like a close-up shot of a rose. So like the rose almost filled the whole screen. And you could just see all this detail in the rose petals. And you just couldn't believe that you were looking at a computer screen. Because like at home, we were playing, with monochrome graphics, or, you'd go to school and there was like Apple IIs. And all of a sudden you're looking at this computer showing this, for the time, photorealistic rose, like red rose on the screen. And you're just like, wow, but then you look over at the price tag and then you're like, wow, but it's the kind of thing where you would just sit there and like stare and like, oh, isn't that so cool? And then, but at some point not long afterwards, Stuart was able to get a color monitor and a color graphics card as hand-me-downs from his dad. And because, his dad probably upgraded to a Super VGA. I don't know what happened, but, his dad needed something better or just wanted something better. And so Stuart got his old one. And but meanwhile, I just still had the monochrome, so I would get to go over to Stuart's house and play some color games there. But then, like for a while, there was a time where then I would have to go back home to my monochrome computer, which, it was very cool that he had the color monitor. And I'm not going to try to claim that somehow I wasn't envious, but I definitely just still thought that it was really cool that I had a computer at all. And, one of the things that I think has been kind of a running theme in the show is that, as a kid, because of our sort of, financial position, there were a lot of things that I just assumed, like, that's not for me. Like, I can't have that. And so something like a color monitor was like one of those things. Because remember, I got the entire computer system for something like $250. That's the number that sticks out in my mind. I'd have to ask my mom. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember it being really cheap, or otherwise I wouldn't have been able to get it. So to think that I was going to be able to get like a color monitor and a video card, which at that time would have cost more than the computer cost in the first place. It's like, it's just not going to happen. So don't spend time worrying about it. So I was just happy to have what I had. And like, I went over to Stuart's pretty much every day after school anyway. And so we could play games in color on his computer. And the first game that I remember playing, I'm not saying it was the first, outside of the Sierra Adventure games, the first game that I remember playing in color at his house was a game called The Red Baron. And he had that game because The Red Baron was released by this company called Dynamics, which I talked about a little bit in the last episode because I have that mug that says Dynamics on it. And I don't know if Dynamics was at one point its own separate company and Sierra bought them, or like, I don't know what the deal was, but they were somehow part of Sierra. And so Stuart had this game, The Red Baron. And it was like this World War I flight combat game. So you were like flying a biplane, and you had different missions that you would go on. And I remember it seems like we used to just always play the first mission over and over again because it was the only one that we were any good at. And it was called balloon busting. And it had something to do with like, in World War I, I guess they used hot air balloons, to maybe drop bombs on enemy lines. I don't really know. But I think that we just enjoyed the sensation, or whatever you want to call it, of feeling like we were flying around in a plane, and just target shooting or something was good enough. Like, you'd get to the next mission and now you were dogfighting, and it got way harder. And that didn't mean we didn't do it, but we weren't ever really that great at it. But yeah, like, so that's the first game I remember playing at his house in color. So my 14th birthday would have been in 1991, towards the end of the school year. And I did really want a color monitor, obviously. And my recollection is that I saw some kind of sales ad in the paper, like not in the classified, but I think like some local computer shop had put this ad in the paper, and it was advertising like a 14-inch Super VGA monitor with a Super VGA card. I was going to say it was a 1 megabyte card, but I don't remember that for sure. But it came with a card. And I honestly don't remember how much it was. I actually did some research to try to figure out how much something like that would have cost in 1991, just looking through old issues of like PC Magazine and stuff online. And it seems like a Super VGA monitor was going to run you like $400 just by itself. And so I can't imagine it was that much, but part of the reason that I really wanted to get the one that I saw in the paper is that it was really cheap. And the reason for that was that it was a cheap monitor, and it was probably a no-name graphics card. I don't even know if it had, like, the chipset on it might have been like Paradise or Trident. I don't remember, but it was like, you just got the card in like an anti-static bag that was in like a plain cardboard little box. Like, you weren't getting like a retail nice video card. But so what I think I ended up doing for my birthday that year is I basically just asked everybody for money. Like I asked my dad, like I told him, I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to save up. I want to get this computer monitor. And so I got everybody to give me money. And then, based on what I used to do back then, I'm guessing I probably also went and worked a bunch of odd jobs and saved up the money and probably conned my grandma or something, or my mom, into making up whatever difference I still needed to go get this monitor and video card. And so that's what I did. I ended up coming home. It was a 14-inch Samtron, not Samsung, Super VGA monitor, and then it came with the video card. And I don't remember if I actually tried to install it myself or if I just had Stuart come over and help me with it. But either way, at some point he came over. Like, maybe I tried myself and couldn't get it to work. I don't really know. But at some point he came over, and we just couldn't get it to work. Like, you'd put the card in. The Epson had dip switches on the front that you would set, and I think you had to set different settings to disable like the Hercules graphics and enable a separate video card, or I don't know, whatever. And we had all those set the way they were supposed to be set, and we just could not get a video signal to come out of the card. And I remember, so he called his dad, and his dad actually came over to my house, which is probably one of the only times that ever happened. And he tried to get it to work, and he couldn't get it to work. And, you know, he felt like he knew what he was doing, and he couldn't get it to work. So he ends up going home and getting another video card that he had, a VGA video card, and brings it back, because I think he had a suspicion. He brings it back and puts that one in the computer, and that one works. And basically what he told me is that, because I think he also took the card that I had gotten with the monitor back to his house and tested it in his computer, and the card worked. And so basically what he told me is, he said that card is like too new or too good, and it won't work in your system. So, like, I think what he might have done is gone home and taken the video card out of his computer, because it wasn't as good of a card as the one that I got. And so he brought that one back and then put it in, and it worked. And so basically what he told me is that he would trade video cards with me. Because this way I got a VGA card that worked, and then he got what was for him an upgraded video card. But Stuart's dad was a very honest guy, and so like he knew that that was a lopsided trade, because he was giving me an inferior card and taking the superior card. So on the same day, I got two major upgrades to my computer, because now I've got a color monitor, I've got the VGA card, and then to make up for the fact that he was getting an upgraded video card from me, he gave me a hard drive. And it must have been an extra that he had, because it wasn't a very good hard drive. And so I'm only saying that because I'm sure that he must have had a much better hard drive and bigger hard drive in his computer. But what I got was a 5¼ inch MFM, which I can't remember. It's multi-frequency. I don't remember. It's like, you know, you have like SATA now, and then you had IDE before that. Before IDE, you had like MFM. And then SCSI was in there somewhere too. But this was an MFM hard drive. Then he gave me, I think I had to have a controller for it, because I don't think there was like a hard drive controller built into the motherboard. I don't remember, but it doesn't really matter. So he came over and he helped me take out the B drive, because I didn't have room for to put another drive into this computer. It was a fairly compact case for the time. And so he took out the extra floppy drive, and we just, you know, set it aside somewhere. And then he installed the 5¼ inch 20 megabyte hard drive into the B slot. And then we just put a blanking plate or whatever over it so that it looked nice. And so now all of a sudden I had this 20 megabyte hard drive, which you might be saying like, wow, 20 megabytes, that's like nothing. Which of course, for, you know, compared to now, it's, you know, I have many files on my computer that alone are bigger than 20 megabytes. I probably have pictures bigger than 20 megabytes. But at the time, all I had were double density floppy disks, which a 5¼ inch double density floppy disk, as I just mentioned earlier, was 360K. And so 20 megabytes of hard drive space was equivalent to something like 50. I mean, I'm not going to do the math right now, but it's something like 50 floppy disks. So that's huge. And, you know, plus you could just set the computer to boot from the hard drive, which means I didn't have to keep sticking the MS-DOS disk in there anymore. I just had like a DOS directory on the hard drive, and it would just boot right up. And then I could have my games folder on there, and I could copy games to the hard drive, including SimCity, because SimCity has the option to install it to a hard drive. I did put some Sierra games on there, because Stuart gave me some of the Sierra adventure games to put on there. But the way Sierra copy protection worked, you had to have a disk 1. Like anytime you'd play any Sierra game, you'd be like, okay, insert disk 1. But what he did is he just gave me disk 1 from one of his games, because it was somehow like it was just looking for some kind of copy protection thing on the disk. Like I think maybe it was even just how the disk was formatted. So you could have all these games on your computer, and when you would run it, like whether it was King's Quest, Police Quest, Space Quest, whatever, you would go to run it, and it would just say, okay, put disk 1 in the drive, and I would just put this single disk 1 in the drive. It would check it and see that it was like a formatted Sierra disk, and it would just say okay, and it would go ahead and run. But the last game I wanted to just really briefly mention, because this game really isn't that big of a deal, but it's special for me only because this was the first game that I played on my computer in color. And for the time, it just kind of blew my mind. But that game is Arkanoid, and I got Arkanoid again from Stuart. I don't know where he got it. It was part of this like arcade classics series that had been released. And what a great first game to play in color.
All right, so we'll just get Arkanoid loaded up. Nope. Start. So I misspoke a little bit. It's not Arkanoid. It's Arkanoid II: The Revenge of Doe. I mean, what's the difference, right? But it's not the same game. That's the difference. And again, so this was the first game that I played once we were able to get my VGA card working in my computer so that I could actually see things in color. So we'll just go ahead and get a game started while I'm talking. I don't really have too much to say, honestly, about Arkanoid. I mean, it's a very cool game, don't get me wrong, but compared to the other games that I was going to be able to start playing on the PC, this one's not really that big of a deal. But again, it just holds a special place for me, just because, like I said, this was the game that I basically kept trying to load, I think, when we were trying to get the VGA card working. So, oh my god, that's a lot of balls. What's S do? So, I mean, do I really need to explain how Arkanoid works? I mean, I think everybody's played the game by now. It's kind of a rip-off of Atari's Breakout, although this is obviously a much deeper and better game. Probably the coolest thing about this game to me, well, two things. One, you can use the mouse when you're playing it on your computer. And that's also the case, by the way, if you get the Apple II GS version, which is a really good version of the game. Now we can get that out of here. And so yeah, that's a cool version of the game. But anyway, my point was just being able to use the mouse with this game is really cool. Just because that way you have analog input rather than using the keyboard when you then would not have analog input. And some of these pellets that you knock out drop power-ups, and I don't know if we'll get one here or not, but my favorite power-up, and probably most people's really, is the laser weapon, which it'll be like a red pellet with an L on it, and with that you can just shoot out the pellets instead of having to only use this bouncy ball. There we go. Oh, good, I got it. All right, yeah, see, so now you get the weapon, which of course you just fire using the mouse button, which is very convenient. And you can see how much faster you can start clearing everything out. And the only thing with this, with the game in general, I guess, is that once you get a power-up that you like, I just accidentally got rid of the laser there, that's what I was going to say. Once you get a power-up that you like, sometimes it can be a challenge to hang on to it. So anyway, I mean, that's kind of enough of that probably, and I don't know why it keeps thinking that I'm playing the game two-player. I'm sure it's something about the way I started the game. I don't really know. Anyway, that's Arkanoid II. Once again, the first game that I played in color on my Epson Equity II.
I had a blast playing that. Like I'm sure I must have played Arkanoid in the arcades at some point, but like I never had the NES version with that VOS controller. So getting to play it that way was pretty darn cool. And like I said, just being able to play that in color. Now I could play SimCity in color. And of course I had my GW basic disc. And so now I could write programs and have stuff be in color as well. And then the last thing I wanted to sort of throw into this episode, because I don't really know where else to put it, is at some point, I don't remember if Stuart had a modem just like right away, like when I met him or not, or if it's something that he got later. And we're going to talk more about modems later. I could do a whole episode just talking about BBSs, so we'll wait, to talk about that. But the one thing I just want to mention now is that, so he had this modem, and his dad, being a college student, had had access to like computers on campus that the public didn't have access to. And I don't know if it was on campus or what, but somewhere there was a Cray supercomputer in town. It was probably on campus. I don't know where else it would be if not on the campus. But unlike us, like, we had our modem and you could dial in. I don't think we knew about any BBSs yet at that time. But you could dial into some local computer, or you could dial into some long distance computer and pay the long distance charges if you wanted to. If you dialed into the Cray, from there, the Cray was on like a network. Like, I don't know if it was some kind of like ARPANET thing or even back then, I mean, universities had like, network connections with each other and whatnot. And so we would dial, and we would just call it that, like, oh, let's call the Cray, or let's dial into we would say, let's call the Cray. Because I remember being like, well, what's a Cray? What is that? Like, is that like a proper noun? Is that a person or something, or a lab? But we would dial into the Cray, and the only thing we would ever do that I remember is from there. I don't know if it was telnetting or how, you'd get on the Cray, and from there, once you were logged in or whatever, like, he'd have to put in like his dad's username and password. You type in some commands, and we would get connected to this other computer that was in like Indiana or something. And it ran this program, and I'd be curious to know if anybody else did this back then, because I've never really met anybody who has it. It was this program called DQ Mud. It was DQ like DIKUMUD, not like DQ like Dairy Queen. Imagine a late 80s, early 90s, all text MMORPG. Like, imagine playing World of Warcraft, but it's like 1991 and it's all in text. That's what this DQ Mud thing was like. And I remember we were just like mind blown by it, because like, you would log in and it kind of had the same interface as these text adventure games, where it's like you would type like, go north and look around, and like every time you'd go into a new square on the grid or whatever you want to call it, it would give you a little description of where you were. And then I think you actually had to type in a command if you wanted to see if anybody else was on that same piece of the grid as you, because basically you could chat with anybody that was on the same grid. Like, if you I don't know if you had to type like say and then blah, blah, blah. I don't remember how it worked. But I mean, you would go and explore and fight monsters, and you could buy things at shops. And, because it was all text, you'd be having to sit down and draw out a map of where you were going and everything. But, that was my first experience with like computer telephony. And I just remember that being the coolest thing. And we'll talk more about BBSs and, BBS door games and whatnot in another episode. I think what I'm going to do now, so that's kind of the end of what I have to say for this episode. But what I thought would be kind of cool, SimCity, like I said, is the only game that I really remember playing in monochrome graphics, and then getting my color monitor and still playing SimCity. Like, whereas, it opened this door to all these new games that I could play in color now, versus like some of the weird little janky shareware games I was playing in, black and green. SimCity was such an awesome game that I was just excited that now I got to play it in color. And so I think the me sitting here portion of the show is now basically done. And but sort of to close out the show, we're going to play a little bit of the same copy of SimCity, but now playing it in EGA graphics instead of in Hercules graphics. So here we go.
All right, so now we are going to try to alter the SimCity installation so that we can play the game in color. And I mentioned that you can kind of have a hard time finding a copy of this game on the internet, like a copy of the original game, like the non-deluxe version. And the only place that I was able to find a copy was on one of those abandonware websites. But I was able to find a copy there, but it's like somebody had installed it on their computer and then just copied the installation directory, so you didn't have the installation program anymore, which you need. So we're going to rerun install, and it's going to make us answer all these dopey questions, and we're going to put it right back in the same place that it was. But see, now we can change which video mode that we want to use, and we're going to do 640 by 350 16 color, which I believe it says EGA/VGA. I think that's still considered EGA, 640 by 350 16 color. But anyway, so we're going to hit that, and then we have to agree and say yes, and no joystick, and this shows you the different sound options you have. Of course, you have none, and then IBM really just means the PC speaker, and then Tandy Digital, which makes sense. I didn't think about that. If you had something like a Tandy 1000, I believe that had a better sound chip in it than what you would get out of a PC speaker. And then there's that Kovacs Soundmaster, which I've never had one of those, so I don't even know what that's like. So we're going to say yes to everything, and okay, and I was right. So that's SimCity version 1.07. So I think that those are the newer discs of the discs that I had. So now we should be able to go in and relaunch the game. And now, if everything happened just fine, that now it should be in color, and there it is, in color. So you can see that looks way better. Now we should still be able to go ahead and load our city, because why wouldn't we be able to? And there it is now. Oh yeah, and then we have to do this dopey copy protection again. So it's on the back page. The black stripe is on top, and the white circle is okay. So this is the city of Hamilton, population 542980. 542980. There we go. All right, cool. Oh, by the way, this is so for some reason one of the copies of the game that I got came with a sheet that isn't that weird maroon thing. So I don't know if at some point they just gave up, because this is the sheet that came with the later version of the game. So I don't really know how much time we're gonna spend playing this. I missed it. It said citizens demand a something. I bet the citizens were demanding a fire department or something. And so let's get where we were here. Oh my god, yeah, I forgot about that. So right when I saved the game, unfortunately I didn't get it on camera, which would have been really cool. There was an explosion, because I don't have so when I used to play the game back in the day, I would have disasters turned off, but I don't have them turned off now, obviously. So, and now we're losing power to the entire city, and that is way too loud. And I think the police station kind of took a hit there. We're still making good tax money though, so I mean that's not so bad. Well, this is actually really bad. So what can we do about this? We're gonna have to tear that down. Hey, go away. Actually, here, let's set the speed on something slower, since we're trying to get rid of a disaster here. And we'll run this over here. Restoring power, I would say, to the city is sort of job one. And oh yeah, look at that. So you have to like isolate all of the squares that are on fire, and like now it wants to scroll all fast because I set DOSBox back to some higher speed than it was on originally. I had it set so it was kind of emulating a okay, well, we already had that once, but it was emulating something a little bit closer to like an 8086, and now it's emulating I don't know, something faster. So all right, so now you got all that bulldozed away, and so now the fires should start going out. Unfortunately, we really can't finish fixing the roads here until this fire right here goes out. So, not that it seems like it's having a huge effect on anything, because my city's still growing nicely. This is getting intolerable. Here, hold on a second. I'm just gonna. All right, so I fixed the scrolling problem, so that now I can scroll it manageably. We are still waiting for this fire to go out, so I don't know what we can do about that. I guess we can just go ahead and build around it, eh? So they're complaining that they want more commercial zones. So one mistake I used to often make when I was a kid is if it said, "Oh, put in more commercial zones," is I'd put in like 3 or 4. But as I said earlier, God damn it, with these commercial zones, less is more. So there's one, and I think we could also probably use some more residential. So I'll put one in right there. See, again, I'm trying not to put in any more roads if I don't have to, because you pay upkeep for every road you put in. And citizens are demanding a fire department, and right about now when these fires won't go out, that sure seems like a good idea. So let's put a fire department right there, and we have to rebuild the police department, which I forgot about. So let's put that right there, and then let's wire that fire department up. And hopefully that means that these fires are going to get put out. See, that one just went out. And so now we can go ahead and put this road back. And so I sort of have this unfortunate mess here now with the power lines, but that's all right. What's going on here? There. Fire went out. All right, so now we can go ahead and put everything back the way it's supposed to be. And so you can see that commercial zone already got, they put a strip mall in there, so that's nice. And see, now we're making way less taxes. And that's because now we have to pay $100 a year for the police station, which we're already paying for, and $100 a year for the fire station. And then you see transportation, that is what we're paying based on how many roads we have laid down. So you don't want to put down any more roads than you have to. And get rid of this crap up here. And then I think we can probably also go ahead and put in some more industrial. So put that, say, there, and I'll put in 2. And I mentioned that when I was a kid, I had the terrain editor. And one of the tricks to playing this game is that when you have the terrain editor, you can load up your city in that editor, and you can add more forest, because if I remember correctly, adding more forest helps mitigate air pollution. And so if I had the terrain editor installed, we could put forest in this entire area here, and that would help keep the pollution from these guys away from the city. Now, what happened in the interim between when I was playing this game in monochrome and now, what happened to cause that fire is that there was a industrial zone right here that blew up, and which actually in a way was kind of a good thing, because that was, of course, causing pollution to be right in my city center, which of course you don't want. So I'm going to go ahead and put one more commercial zone right here next to the fire department, and then we will sandwich one more residential zone in here. And I can't help but think that at some point I'm going to have to put in some parks, because your little Sims like that. So what I think I'll do here is I'm going to make a little, I guess I can start it right here, is I'll put in a riverfront park. That'll look nice. And I don't usually do this. Like when I was a kid, I used to do this. Like I used to sit here and go like this, because you get too many fountains and it doesn't really look right. So you can go like that, and now you just have one fountain right in the middle there. But that way the Sims have a park to go play in, and hopefully that will increase their happiness, and therefore increase the population of my city, and of course therefore the tax revenue, which will allow me to keep building my city that much faster. So now that everything's been taken care of, as far as the fire and whatnot goes, let's put it back up to fast. And then the other thing you can do if you want is you can turn on auto budget, and then it won't show you this. But kind of the downside of that is that you can start losing money and not realize it. But we'll go ahead and do that now. So auto budget. And then other things in the options here, like you've got animate all and then frequent animation. And so I don't know if, maybe some computers weren't really up to the task of doing that. Maybe it would slow down some people's computers. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I used to play this game on like I said, on an 8086, and it worked just fine for me. So I don't really know what the problem is there. So, but now you get back to kind of what I was talking about as far as just sort of hurrying up and waiting. And, because like, what are you going to do? Now I have money, so I can keep building. But, sometimes you like to wait and see, like, things are going to get filled up. You don't want to overbuild, really, is what it comes down to. And I really shouldn't be expanding the city sort of to the north up here, since I'm probably going to keep putting in industrial zones over here. And then one other thing I wanted to see, I'll put into. Do they still have? Oh, yeah. Okay, so I've told this story on the show before, but I really wish I still had this. But if you go into the system menu here, you see that the second option down here is print. And that's because you can actually print out your city if you have a printer hooked up to your computer. And I had like this, my Epson computer came with a printer, I think. It was this big Epson printer. And then somehow later I got like a free Oki Data printer, which was a nice, more compact dot matrix printer. And I had that set up on my desk. And then I just had, one of those big boxes of that line feed dot matrix printer paper that you could get. And I just had the top, taken off the box. And I just had that feeding into my printer, And that was back in the day when, new printer ribbons were really cheap compared to like, now I have a laser printer and it's like, better part of $100 for a new toner cartridge. Although to be fair, you probably need them less often. But anyway, so I printed out my city, and it prints it like pixel for. I mean, maybe not literally pixel for pixel, but I mean it prints it out in what seemed like it was roughly full size, and so it ends up printing out something like 12 pages, and of course there's going to be white space around all of them. So I printed the whole thing out, and then I took that whole long sheet, because the pages are all connected together and they're perforated when it's a dot matrix printer. And I went into the kitchen and laid it on the kitchen floor, and I got scissors out, and I very carefully cut out all that unused white space. And then I taped the entire map together by putting tape on the back. And because basically what it means is you can make your own poster. Now, mind you, it's in black and white, but you can make your own like SimCity poster of your city. And I had that hanging on my wall for years and years. When I was in high school, and probably even after I graduated high school, it was still there. I bet it was probably still there until I moved away for college. And it's one of those things that I'm sure by then the paper was all yellowed and everything, but I still kind of wish I'd hung on to that. So we can't put a zone here. Let's get a disaster going just for fun. Let's call up a sea monster. So then you get that weird thing. Monster attack. A large reptilian creature has been spotted in the water. And then, and then they're complaining about, I wanted to go find where the sea monster was. Oh, there he is. Instead, they wanted to complain about traffic. So there's the sea monster. You see he's kind of headed this way. And we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I guess I'd better put down some more roads, which unfortunately is going to cut into our tax revenue. But people are complaining about traffic jams. One of the other things that you can do in this game that's kind of a cheat is you don't actually have to put in roads. You can put in nothing but train tracks instead, and then you never have to deal with traffic jams. And then later, if you put in a airport, then you get a traffic copter that comes along with that. And every time the traffic copter flies over the city center, it'll report heavy traffic. And okay, you see here comes a sea monster, and he's going to destroy Well, he's not going to completely destroy it, but you see he took a big chunk out of that residential there, and here he comes to do another one. And so neither one of the buildings blew up. It has to be, if he hits the center tile or the center square, because each one of those things is made up of 9 little squares. If he hits the center one, highway shootings are on the roads. That's grim. If he hits the center one, then it blows up the entire thing. But this didn't, so you can leave them alone, and nothing will happen. It's just like a cosmetic thing. Or you can tear it down and rebuild it, but then you're basically evicting a lot of your sims, so you have to kind of decide if that's worth it for you. And then unfortunately the sea monster is headed towards our industrial zone, and he is about to knock out power to the city. So I'm gonna go like that just so that he doesn't get to do that. And then I think he's going to manage to squeeze right in between. Oh yeah, there he goes. Oh boy. What are we going to do here? I'm going to put that there, and well, now he's really making a mess now. If I go like that, does that restore power? Yeah, it does. Okay, but you see, he really messed up that industrial zone. I thought he was just going to go cruising off the screen, although now it seems like he's finally going to do that. So, okay, sea monster's gone. That's all been averted. So now I'm going to make this alternate line over here, because I'm going to go ahead and replace, yeah, I know, traffic's bad. I'm going to go ahead and replace that guy and that guy. And then we'll go ahead and put these roads back. So overall, wow, look at that. I built more roads and they're all full too. I don't know what I can really do about that too much. You know, like I said, you want to keep your industrial separated from your city center. So, but I mean, you could sit here for hours, and I did when I was a kid. I mean, you can make a city, as I've done, which completely fills up this entire map. I mean, you can see how much of the map we have filled up. It's next to nothing compared to all the space we have around here. And I showed it earlier, but it was in monochrome. So this city map, which it calls the city form for whatever reason, you can click on various things. Like here, you can make sure everybody's got power. This will show you where you've got your roads set up. You can look at population density, which I don't know why the industrial zones have any population density. And then here's population growth. And that shows you blue is positive, and this yellow is just sort of stagnant. Here's traffic density. Well, we already knew that. Pollution. So you still have pollution here in your city center, even though you don't have any industrial zones, because of course you still have cars. So that's the other thing, is if you put in train tracks instead of roads, then you don't get any pollution from cars. And then you come over here and you can see the crime map. Now, industrial areas always have more crime. There's not like a whole lot you can do about it. You can put in police stations up here, but I don't know really what difference it makes. I mean, people aren't complaining about crime, so I don't really care. Here you've got land value, and which is not really important, I don't think. And this will show you where you have police coverage. So you see the entire city center has police coverage, but that industrial zone does not. And then fire is going to be basically the same situation. So that's how to use the little interactive map that it comes with. So that'll, I guess, about do it for just sort of showing off this game. So what we'll do as we sign off, let's start an earthquake, just because that looks pretty neat. Overwrite hot dam. Again, I'll explain what hot dam means in a future video. It's really not that great of a story. All right, so I saved my city, so now we're going to go ahead and just because I think this looks neat, we are going to do an earthquake. So here we go. Oh yeah, everything's shaking. This does probably the most damage in earthquake, because it affects. Ooh, where was there? Oh god damn it! With the traffic, I want to see where the. Oh yeah, so there's where the explosion was. So you see that. Oh boy, we're gonna get power knocked out soon because our coal power plant is on fire. I got this fire going on over here, and the only thing you really do about this is the best thing to do when this kind of thing happens, really, is that you should pause the game, which is kind of cheating, but you really have to clear out anything that could catch on fire, and that includes rubble. So you have to bulldoze around where. Yeah, so you can't do it. You have to bulldoze around where the fires are. And we're lucky that in town no fires started, but you can see that there's been quite a bit of damage. So yeah. So anyway, I don't know. That's a perfectly good place to go ahead and stop. I just wanted to show that game to you guys and play it a little bit more. I know everybody has seen SimCity, but this way you got to see it. Here's what it looked like in monochrome, and then here's what it looks like in color. On the next episode of Flashback, we're going to play another iconic game, and that's really probably the only game I have to talk about for the next episode. Well, nah, I just thought of another one. We have at least 2 games, I think, that we'll talk about on the next episode, and I'll try to come up with a third, but I try to group things together in a logical way. But yeah, so that's going to do it for this episode of CGQ Flashback. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.